Titterpigs, oh yeah. They're gonna talk about sweet, sweet RPGs. And it's the Titterpigs, the RPG podcast. Am I getting paid for this one?
All right, welcome back to another episode of Titterpigs. Scott and I are back in the studio tonight for episode 30. Holy shit, Scott. 3-0. We are getting old.
We are definitely getting old, but we're actually getting old, but we're also getting younger at the same time, because next month is going to be what for us?
We are going to celebrate the Terrible Twos.
The Terrible Twos. We've been doing this silly little podcast that for over 2 years now, and with that comes the ability we can now go pee-pee by ourselves. Yay! We can put our shoes on, although we don't know how to tie them yet. But
I got Velcro, bro.
Lazy ass. I probably wore cowboy boots at that time too, because it was the 80s.
Slip-ons.
But yeah, so 30 years old and 2 years doing this podcast, this grand experiment of ours that justifies our middle-aged
existence, our midlife crises.
Our midlife crisis, yes. And who would have thought that two white guys with grain beers would do a podcast for the midlife crisis?
Yeah, I don't know.
I mean, I've never.
But here we are.
Yeah,
coming up on 2 years. This is our 30th episode. We're going strong.
Yeah.
We've got a good, solid listener base. So thanks, everybody, for listening. We really appreciate it.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So let's get into episode 30. Let's have a little discussion here about something that might
do this.
Grinding our gears for a little bit before we actually get into our interview. So again, I'm going to throw the ball back at you for a layup. What are we going to talk about first?
All right, so in our opening segment for this episode, if listeners might remember that we talked about in episode 29 our Ennie picks for the 2023 Ennies in the various categories. We had two special guests with us.
Yes.
And we all threw out our specific hopes and dreams for each category, what our personal preferences were. And some of them were chosen by the general population that voted. Some of our hopes and dreams were dashed on the rocks of, the general public.
Well,
but we're gonna
go ahead.
What's that?
No, I said we actually our hopes or dreams were dashed live because we did watch them. Well, let me backtrack a little bit. Okay. I know you and other people watched them live, and you told me the next day that I did also, but I don't remember any of it.
Well, that's because you were drunker than a skunk, and your eyes weren't crossed; they were counter-crossed. You were looking sideways. It was beautiful.
Oh, and I'm sure I was demure, quiet, no shouting, no babbling
head kept
on,
banging on your microphone. We had to mute you a few times.
Well,
but anyways,
yes,
listeners, we are going to we're going to kind of reach back, and we want to revisit, and talk about some of the nominees and the silver and gold winners. And then also give a couple of shout outs to some winners.
Right.
And then from that, we'll probably roll into our main segment. So, Scott, which category are we going to talk about first?
Well, the first one I'm going to talk about is one that is a favorite of mine. As people may know, I'm a big tabletop RPG art fan, and I do feel that art is important in all things, in your books, in your adventures, and things that you do. It's what's going to draw you in. And especially a cover. So what we're going to talk about first is the best art nomination for a cover. So we have the nominees were Blackbirds by Dave Raposa, Historica Arcanum by Yagmir Kayak. Sorry if I mispronounced that. Shiver Gothic, Secrets of Spirehome Special Edition by Ben Alexander. Swords of the Serpentine, or Teen, if you're here in the States, by Jerome Huguenin, and Xanadu, a Nibiru expansion by Piotr Gajda. Yeah,
I think.
Yeah, I mean, again, sorry for butchering your name, but we try. So those are the nominees, Keith. Who won?
So coming in in the silver category, or silver winner, was Swords of the Serpentine, and for the gold was Historica Arcanum.
Right.
Now, for those of us that voted, or any of the listeners that abstained from voting, or maybe just looked at the collage of the covers,
yeah,
you may recall that Historica Arcanum is the one that was a skull. It was a beautiful looking skull, but it had a painted on mustache. It just looked kind of silly, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I don't know. There were better covers than that. And Swords of the Serpentine, in my opinion, is an okay cover, but it was the least attractive cover of the 5.
I will kind of disagree slightly, because again, Historic Arcanum, no one voted for that, at least in our group that I can recall.
None of us did.
Yeah, that wasn't the top. And again, this is not detracting from the skill that is required to do these covers. But of course, you're voting for your favorite one, the ones you think looks the best. It is art and it's subjective. Anyways, it's a skull with fangs and a mustache, and mind you, a very well drawn skull on
and a red fez
in a relatively a black background with silver lettering and a frame surrounding the skull. I'm not looking at it, I'm just going off of memory. But yeah, I don't know. It just kind of boggled my mind. Like, I mean, not first off, we didn't vote for it. Second, it's like, I can think of a few other that might want to be here besides this. And yet it won gold.
What did you vote for? What was your pick?
Mine was Blackbirds.
Okay. I thought you and I think James voted for Blackbirds too. He was one of our special guests. And myself and Lloyd, if I recall correctly, we both voted for Xanadu.
Yes.
But my second choice and kind of like runner-up special mention was Shiver. I thought it was just, it has this aesthetic to it that's just visually very pleasing.
Yeah. So,
but nobody chose Swords of the Serpentine because it's an okay cover. It's not bad. Just like Historica and Arcanum is not bad. It's just there are better choices.
Right, but it was a shocker. It was a shocker.
Yeah.
This is probably
that was what, like in sports, that's an upset.
It's an upset. This was probably the first one that I banged my head against the mic over. Just like, are you effing kidding me? So yeah,
those were some of the words you used. Yes,
it was an upset. But again, art is subjective. All of these nominations are very talented in their own right. But personally speaking, neither of us felt that the gold winner should have been given to Historica Arcanum. So and please, Metis Creative, do not unsubscribe from our podcast.
We still love you.
Yes, we still love you, and it's just personal opinion on art. So
yeah,
all right,
don't take it personally.
Yeah,
okay. I think we're gonna jump over to best cartography because we all had some opinions on the cartography front. So in this category, there was the Blade Runner RPG starter set from Free League by Christian Granath, the Campaign Builders, Cities and Towns Maps Folio from Cobalt Press by Sarah Morris, John Pintar, and Tommy Salama. If I'm mispronouncing anybody, I apologize. Claw Atlas, new maps for Beak, Feather, and Bone from Possible World Games.
Yeah.
By Jonathan Yee. Duck Quest from Exalted Funeral by Darcy Perry. And Highguard Update 2022 from Mongoose Publishing. That's by David Dyson, Gare Landeskog, Jeremy Rector, James Seguru, and Adrian Times. Yeah. And I butchered that some more too. So, hey, welcome to Titterpigs, right?
So, yeah, I mean, again, this is another bit of, art is subjective.
It is.
But, and we won't go into too much detail, but Ennie's, be sure and do a collage for the cartography nominees. Because there's,
please.
If you want us to vote, we need to see what makes them so special. And if it's art, since you already do it for the interior and the cover, do it for cartography because of that. There might have been a change in the actual winners, in my opinion. So, anyways, how was your how
my
were your
hopes
feelings?
and dreams were dashed on the rocks.
Right. What was your pick?
Duck Quest.
Duck Quest. Okay.
I thought the map had this very old school, reminded me of something from like Ultima 4, Ultima 5 days. Just kind of had this old school aesthetic to it. From my childhood, I don't know, it was pleasing to look at. But I had to follow the link for Duck Quest over to Exalta Funeral, which they had a map there, and I had to click on it to expand it out.
Yeah.
Meh. It would have been nice to have a collage that I could click into and then see a larger view of it. It would have been nice.
Right.
And the other things, I mean, the silver winner was Claw Atlas. So, because we haven't said that yet. And the gold winner was
Blade Runner.
And I still, this blows my mind, is the Blade Runner RPG starter set.
Right.
Very utilitarian maps. There's nothing wrong with the cartography in these maps. There's nothing, but they're utilitarian.
Yes, they're sterile. They are, I mean, and to be perfectly honest, you could swap them out with any one of the alien maps, and you probably wouldn't know the difference. It's the same aesthetic, and again, just a usable, serviceable map. Detailed in itself. If I was looking at a computer of a top-down map on a video game, that it would be perfect, and that's the aesthetic they're looking for. But again, cartography is one part usability and one part art, as far as I'm concerned.
Right, but nothing sets it for the gold winner. Nothing sets it, in my opinion. Again, just Keith's opinion.
Right,
nothing sets it above and beyond anything else that was there.
Yeah.
At least with the Duck Quest, in my opinion, it had usability, functionality. It was a world map. It had things on the map. It had labels. I mean, it wasn't just utilitarian.
Yeah.
It had a bigger, broader appeal and feel to it. Again, just my opinion, but
But I do feel, because Claw Atlas, to me, I didn't pick that. In fact, that would have been the bottom of my list.
I think James did.
Again, not because of anything other than the fact that out of the 5, I just felt their maps were a bit boring. They were black and white. They were a bit adolescent in their design, and maybe that's the aesthetic they were going for.
It is.
But if you hold that up, there's maps in there. If you hold that map up to the world map of Duck Quest, there's no comparison.
Yeah, true story.
Duck Quest, just outshines it in all areas. Yeah. But yeah, so another one that was not as upsetting as some of the other categories, but was just kind of like, what? Because I think I voted for Blade Runner as the silver winner, just because out of all the others, we couldn't see them for the most part. And I had played the game, so I knew them. But still, it shocked me that it was the gold winner too.
Yeah. So speaking of upsetting, let's go to an upset, an absolute upset. So let's go to best family game.
Mm-hmm.
Who was in this? What was in the category, Scott? Who were the nominees?
Well, we have Avatar Legends, the role-playing game starter set by Magpie Games. We have Color My Quest by Dice Up Games. We have Horseshoe Academy by Ninth Level Games. We have Princess Guard by Amalara Game Studio. And The Goblings by Slow Quest. Now, out of those 5 categories, 4 of those kind of have the same feel to them, like they're actually designed and serviceable for a family with children. One of them, not so much.
Ooh, Mr. Carter, pick me.
Sure,
I can figure it out.
Yeah, what is it?
I'm going to say it's Color My Quest.
Wrong.
Oh, sorry, Mr. Carter.
See me
Would
after
it be
class.
Avatar Legend?
I mean, yeah. And the gold winner, Avatar Legend. So
Told you it was a shocker. You banged your head on your microphone and your desk a few times.
Yes.
I can still see the thump, the bruise and the bump on your head.
I mean, Color My Quest is specifically designed for you and your kids and your family to have a good time as an introduction to role-playing games. Princess Guard maybe a little bit step up. Horseshoe Academy the same way. The Goblins, but they all seem to be slotted specifically for younger children. Avatar,
That like 6 to 10-year-old,
Yeah.
you play with your kids. It's meant for parents to play with their children. Truly the embodiment of family games.
Right.
Avatar Legends, yes, you can play with your family. I can play any game with my granddaughter and my kids. That's fine.
Right.
But Avatar Legends, I think it's a step up in complexity, just outside the scope of really what the rest of the nominees in this category are for. But I think, Scott, the one thing we don't know, because I'm too lazy and can't be arsed to go look it up, is what, by category definition, what defines the family game for the Ennies, though?
I mean, according to this list, I would say, does it have a cartoon character on the cover?
Well, that's by this list, but what, so we talked about it in episode 29.
Yeah.
There's some confusion on what constitutes a podcast, for God's sakes.
Oh, of course, yeah.
As long as it's got audio, it doesn't matter that it's an entire YouTube channel. It can qualify as a podcast.
Right. Love you, Seth.
Congratulations, Seth. And we still love you, buddy. With that being said, what's the criteria for family game? It may still fit the criteria, even though you and I, and probably many others personally disagree with it being considered a family game when in context compared to the other games that it's racked and stacked with.
Yeah. I'll give you.
Yes, I'm playing devil's advocate.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to go look it up, but I'll give you my opinion on what it should be. It should be a game that is easily digestible by a pair of parents who have never played an RPG before, and children anywhere between the ages of 5 and 9 years old. I mean, that's my opinion on what it should be. Just because it has starter in the name and a cartoon character on the cover, and because it's on a children's network, but let's be honest, Nickelodeon really hasn't been a children's network since you and I were children, that it's not necessarily a family gamer product. So yeah, right. I mean, that's just it. I think there's a bit of definition, and this has been a point of contention for years with the Ennies. It's just, the title of the category versus what the hell do they mean by that? And I don't think there's ever been a year where everyone fully agreed that the nominees underneath specific category titles, people weren't scratching their head at one.
So I just brought it up, just to continue the conversation, since we are talking about it. So best family game or product. Award for the best role-playing game or product that can be played as a family. So I think Cult would be a good family game.
Absolutely. I mean, any game, you and I know, any game you can modify the rules to play with your family. And it's also up to what content you feel that your children can handle. Me personally, Colt right out of the box for your 5-year-old granddaughter, no problem.
Chef's kiss, baby. Yeah.
I mean,
maybe not so much, but
right. Yes.
But the point being, there's no definition to it, to say that it's under 18 or under, it needs to be PG rated or whatever. So any game could be lumped into that category.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, again,
Ennies, get your shit together.
I know. Just
it's my gripe every year.
Yeah. All right.
So, let's move on.
Yes. So we have another little. We're going to skip over a bunch of stuff because we're not going to sit here and go over every one. We're just going to go over some that we want to touch on personally. Where the hell did it go? Best layout.
I got it in front of me.
Oh yeah, best layout and design. Okay. So this is a another one that I think we wanted to discuss. So
yeah, we're both a little sore on this one.
Right. Okay. So best layout and design, Keith. What do we got?
All right. So in this category, there was the Blade Runner Core RPG Core Rulebook from Free League, Eldritch Overlord Tarot and Codex by Weirdworks LLC, Frontier Scum by Games Omnivorous, Nolan's Locks Exquisite Corpse by Liminal Artifact, and Women Are Werewolves 9th Level Games.
Yeah.
So the silver winner was Frontier Scums, which we're going to come back to, and Blade Runner RPG Core Rulebook, which was the gold winner.
Right.
Okay. So, Scott, what was your pick?
I believe my pick was Frontier Scum.
Keith, what was your pick? Oh, thanks for asking, Keith. So my pick was Frontier Scum.
Right.
And, well, I think I can for both Scott and I, we're both a little jaded that Frontier Scum did not get gold.
Right.
Because it is aesthetically fan-fucking-tastic.
Yeah.
It looks like a Sears and Roebuck catalog when you open it up.
Right.
I mean, it is great.
And again, I just got my copy of the Blade Runner Core Rulebook. And I went through it. 50% off, by the way. Yay. And again, Free League does have really good aesthetics with their layout and design. But let's be honest, they do have it as a bit of a Free League template, if you know what I mean. The aesthetics for Blade Runner do carry a bit of the Blade Runner movie, aesthetics and feel to it, but the artwork is still Blade Runner, but it's by the artist who does a lot of their other stuff. The layout looks. I mean, again, if I showed you a page from Blade Runner and a page from Alien, I guarantee you there'll be a page where you're like, I don't know which it's from. If there wasn't Alien in the name.
There's some very discrete similarities, and there's some very overt similarities between the two. But there are some distinctions.
Yes,
no doubt.
But I mean, you open up a Free League book. Most people who enjoy Free League, this is a Free League book.
There's no doubt what a Free League book looks like. It has a visual appeal to it that is distinct unto itself. Vazen books when you look at a Vazen book.
Right.
Some of their other Year Zero books, like Mutant Year Zero product line. When you open up any of the Mutant Year Zero variants in that product line, you're looking at one of the Mutant Year Zero books.
Right. But layout and design, again, it's just not utilitarian, right? It's part of it, but layout and design also has an artistic quality to it. Yeah. And I do, even though as good as Blade Runner RPG Core Rulebook is, Frontier Scum, hands down, just outshines it to the nth degree.
I think so.
Yeah. So this one
just ticks those boxes.
And again, I was probably deep into the live watching we were doing. And you could have told me that I shouted for Blade Runner RPG Core Rulebook to win, and I would have believed you. So, but anyways,
no, you were banging your head against the desk.
Yeah, right. Yeah, let's move on.
Yeah, so those are the four categories we wanted to kind of dip our feet back into and take a moment to bitch, moan, and complain about. But we do want to give just a couple of quick shout outs to some folks, some nominees and some winners. The first one is in the best rules category. Scott, who do we want to give a shout out to?
We want to give a shout out to the wonderful people who designed, wrote, and created Rivers of London, the role-playing game. All the wonderful people that handled this book, but most importantly, Ben Aronovich, Graham Barber, Paul Fricker, Adam Gauntlet, Lynn Hardy, Gavin Inglis, Mike Mason, Karis McDonald, and Luca Sachnowski. But a gigantic shout out to my friend and yours, and they did fix his name on here,
see that?
Lloyd Yan. This was nice to be able to have a friend who did get the silver winner for best rules, and well deserved by all. It is a fantastic book.
Absolutely. So, huge shout out to the entire team, but especially to Lloyd.
And
congrats, Lloyd.
And also a big shout out to the Ennie webmaster for fixing his name.
Yes. All right. And then the last thing we want to do is just a general shout out to everybody, all the nominees in the Product of the Year category. In that category, there was Broken Tales from the World Anvil Publishing, Eldritch Overlord, Tarot and Codex from Weirdworks LLC, Fabula Ultima Core Rulebook from Need Games. They were the silver winner, by the way. Flabbergasted, the Wanderer's by the Wanderer's Tome, Household by Two Little Mice, Journeys Through the Radiant Citadel from Wizards of the Coast, Rivers of London, the role-playing game from Chaosium, Swords of the Serpentine from Pelgrane Press, Trophy RPG box set from the Gauntlet Publishing Community and Hedge Maze Press, and Vazen RPG, Mythic Britain and Ireland from Free League Publishing, which was the gold winner. So shout out to all 10 of those. All fantastic nominees, all worthy of being there. And the silver, as I said, was Fabula Ultima, which I then proceeded to go out and pick up for my son because he loves Japanese video games and JRPG stuff, so I got it for him. And then Vazen, Mythic Britain and Ireland won gold. So congrats to everybody.
Right. So, congrats to everyone. So, Keith, do we have anything else to bitch and moan about?
I don't think so. Not today.
All right. Well, I think that concludes the first part of this episode. So, if we have nothing else to moan and grouse on about, let's get on to the interview and get to why the people are actually here for this episode. Ian Sharpe and his wonderful RPG, When the Wolf Comes. Hello, listeners. Scott here, and I hope you are enjoying this episode of Titterpigs. Do you know that we're now monetized on Spotify? That's right. For as little as 99 cents a month, you can help sustain future episodes and other special events. All you need to do is go to our Spotify homepage, click the About section, and there you will find the support link, or click the link in the description. Know that Keith and I really appreciate any support we get from our listeners, no matter if it's a bit of pocket change or simply sharing Titterpigs with other people. And now, back to the episode.
All right, welcome back, listeners. Today we are back in the studio. With us is Ian Sharpe. Welcome, Ian.
Thank you very much for having me on.
Awesome.
Yeah, no, welcome aboard. It's nice to have you here, and we'd like to. There's a cattail on the screen, listeners. This makes for good podcasting, but anyways, we have to point that out. This will stay in the episode too, because she's now officially the third Titterpig. Anyways, Ian,
the tail is signaling. It's a bit like semaphore, a bit like flags. It's giving me all kinds of cues and indications.
Absolutely.
But anyways, I digress, like we always do in this show. But yes, Ian, welcome here, and we are here to talk about a very interesting setting that has fallen to our laps. The Viking Verse, which is a series of comic books, and the RPG When the Wolves Come, that were inspired by these comics. But before we dive into that, we tend to do the usual rigmarole for our listeners who are interested in your background and your introduction to gaming. So, what was little Ian's first dive into the role-playing game world?
Well, hopefully it's a rigmarole and not rigor mortis, but the first thing that I picked up when I was a kid was AD&D second edition, I suppose. Although I did have the red box, the old, again, because I come from the UK, you might have gleaned that from my golden tonsils here, but the in the UK we had the red basic D&D box, and I'm at age 12. I remember running a D&D club, and there was an adventure in that box, which was this usual kobolds and carrion crawlers, and you'd assemble your party and wander into that dungeon. And because I was quite new and learning, I took a whole class of 32 people through that dungeon, and didn't have the wherewithal or the savvy to realize that I needed to kind of upgrade the number of kobolds. So, as you can imagine, taking a small army of 32 12-year-olds with crossbows and short swords made short work of the one carrion crawler and 4 kobolds. And that was that. And I think the next week, not so many people came back to D&D clubs, but that was where it all started. But the kind of inspiration for me as a kid was Warhammer. I got into Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay. I preferred that dark, gritty, old world European fantasy to the high fantasy of D&D. And so we played many campaigns of Warhammer. Played a lot of the tabletop battle stuff. Was an early adherent of 40K. Because that game came out when I was a teenager as well. And then all of the 2000 AD comic stuff, the Judge Dredd, the Rogue Trooper, the Nemesis, the Warlock, the fighting fantasy game books published by Ian Livingstone. All of that stuff was my manna from heaven. And as a child of divorce, I would then tug on the heartstrings of parents too. Oh, I really need this new release, this new game. Please buy it for me. And sorry for that, mother and father, if you ever listen to the podcast. That's just how manipulative I was as a small child.
Oh, I get that. My mother had a ruling precedent for me and my brothers was she always wanted us to be readers. And there was a rule in the house, if there ever was a book that you wanted, and it wasn't available at the library, we would do our best to get it for you because she wanted us to enjoy, the love of reading like she was. Well, of course, the same manipulation occurred. Well,
of course it did.
With mother, you understand. Once I opened the box, inside is reading materials like you couldn't even imagine. She's like, but it's a game. I'm like, but I'm reading. And so the poll was, the tug of war began, and eventually I won over. But
listen, we wouldn't know words like prestidigitation if we hadn't played D&D, right? The D&D does teach you a rich and wild vocabulary of just the strangest words, and I'll pivot slightly to this because I think it's interesting. Just some of the words that we use in role playing, whether it's cleric or barbarian or mage, all of these are actually really old words, right? The role players and authors have tugged from history. A paladin, for example, was the royal guard of the palace, and that's where we get the paladin from. It's a French word. We're familiar with the bards and the druids and where they come from, the Celtic mythology. But everything barbarian, that's a Greek word. Mage comes from the Persian tradition. And then there are some keywords that come from the Norse tradition, which we can wax lyrical about later. Fighter is a very old English word. Thief is an old English word. Stems from the Old Norse, the kissing cousin language. Of course, the berserk and things like that. But all of these things are just really old words, and we wouldn't use them in our role-playing lexicon if we weren't all inherently fascinated by language and how it sounds and how cool it is and how it brings things to life. So I completely get it. Reading just unlocks all of that imagination. There's so many great etymological discussions that can come from RPG.
Right. But I do wish at least the earlier books did provide pronunciation guides for a lot of the words, because there's nothing more embarrassing than when you utilize one of these words in front of a group of people and realize that you've been mispronouncing, these wonderful words for many, many years, and no one had the heart to tell you that, you've been embarrassing yourself since you were 19.
Scott, can you give us an example?
Yeah, which was your worst?
Oh, I'd have to. Oh God. I know I was mispronouncing. Was it homunculus? I don't remember how I was saying it incorrect. I'm dyslexic, so a lot of times the way I read words, I will miss letters or something, and then it will just stick over time because I'm pronouncing it in my head. Oh. And until I finally say the word out loud in front of a group of people, and I remember that I had mispronounced that. I don't remember how badly it was, but that was one that stuck in my mind. So much so that, homunculus, homunculi, homunculi, whatever. That was one that I wanted to maintain in my brain to never embarrass myself again. But it will still continue. There'll be many.
There's a good one from our table where someone was very convinced that the word phlegm, which is a difficult word to spell, was pronounced phlegm, and spraying splegum over people when you cough was interesting. But the thing is, again, separated by a common language, because I'm from across the water. You say beta, but I say beta, and so do technically the ancient Greeks say beta as well. And I've never been able to fathom how somehow in North America everyone says beta when it just clearly isn't and never was. It's beta. So you can introduce that, and don't get me started on aluminium.
Oh my God!
Every single part of the periodic table ends IUM. It's kind of obvious. Aluminum, that's a spelling mistake that Mr. Webster made when he did his dictionary.
I know what Keith is going to say. Go ahead, Keith.
We have had this discussion on many occasions in our Friday night pubs, which are predominantly Brits,
UK, yeah.
And Scott and I are the token Americans. There's a couple of token Canadians,
yes,
and we're the odd people out.
Yeah, we're annoying like that. The British just pointing out spelling mistakes wherever we go.
Yeah, I mean, but at the end of the day, we have a nice pint, and we all get along and listen to the rock stylings of ZZ Top. Yeah. So
yeah. Well, that's a good one. That's a good comeback. But there's another band called the Beta Band, who are British. when they went on tour and everyone was saying, the Beta Band, it's like, who are these people? We've got these imposters. Anyways.
Oh yeah. So I mean, interesting, because I mean you do kind of fall in line with a lot of the standard, most people that we know from the UK, their introduction usually was fighting fantasy or Warhammer. A lot, I mean, D&D or AD&D did fall in line, but those usually weren't their first ones. But as you said, it did roll into a lot of the other ones, the fighting fantasy and more local authors. Anything that was published or advertised in White Dwarf, roll into Golden Heroes, as you said, Judge Dredd, things like that. So, excuse me. Pardon me. So with that, let's talk about the Viking Verse, the inspiration for this. And I understand that you are the author of it. It is a comic. I mean, it is presented as a comic book. So let me just jump in there, because there's a couple of novels and then a series of comics. So okay,
the novel, the first novel I started writing in 2016, called The Allfather Paradox. Okay. And that was followed by Loki's Wager in 2019, and I can dive into those a little bit. The Jotun War series is the comic.
Okay.
So the Jotun War series is kind of all of them are set in this alternative timeline where the Norse never Christianized, and so roll on to the present day, and they not only sail the seas but the stars as well, and there is a whole alternate timeline mapped out and included in the RPG that we just launched, based upon this setting, which is When the Wolf Comes, which is then powered by Rob Schwab's Shadow of the Demon Lord rule set. And so that's come out this week and is on drive-through RPG in PDF form. All of the books exist as physical things. When the Wolf Comes will exist as a physical book shortly as well. We just got to get rid of the last few errata by throwing it out to proofreaders in the public sphere. They many eyes make light work. But yes, that's the setting. It's all this parallel timeline where the Norse never Christianized, and so a pagan present results shorn of things like the Latin language, the French influence, shorn of all of the things that we take for granted today that permeate all of our existence, because Christianity, being a Western civilization, is just everywhere. From saying childhood prayers to saying amen to the kids, saying grace, to celebrating Easter and Christmas and all of those things. And I've stripped all of that away to try and create as plausible a pagan present setting as possible.
So inspiration wise for this, I mean, why the Norse aspect of it? Was this something that you've been interested in for some time, or is this just essentially something that came to you? I'm interested to see why you chose this particular aspect for your alternative history.
Yeah. So there's a few answers to that. The first is that when I started writing the novels, I suffered my own personal Ragnarok. Ragnarok being the twilight of the gods, and not to put myself quite in the same category as Odin and Thor, impressive though my physique is. I lost a company that went down the tubes. Brexit was happening. Mr. Trump was elected all in that same year, and it did really feel like the world had been thrown to the wolves. Of course, Ragnarok continues on a daily basis now that the planet is burning and the inflation is going sky high. So it's just, but that's the essence of Ragnarok, right? It's this cyclical thing. It's this fated end. And so I just like playing with that. So I came up with this notion that Odin, the All-Father, who knows knows in his bones, knows for all of his existence that he is fated to be swallowed by the wolf. Right? So you wake up every day and you know that at some point you're going to be eaten by the wolf, and there's no way around it. So I'd liked the toying with the idea of how do you get a do-over? How do you get to hit the restart button? How do you get to try again? And I play a lot of video games. I worked for Electronic Arts for a long time, worked for Atari. So come out of video games, and with those you get to restart. You don't get to restart life, unfortunately. No. But I did come up with this notion that, okay, so what if Odin could tinker with the timelines, change things around, not become the marginalized figure played by Anthony Hopkins in Marvel movies, but retain his preeminence over, the great Northern Germanic tradition, which extended to England, and one of the reasons why I like the Vikings is the part of the world that I came from was, for an awful long time, ruled by a guy called King Guthrum. They took over, the Danes came over, carved up England, divided it in half, and ran it as the Danelaw. And so it's not really that much of a stretch to think, well, what if they didn't lose the battle of, Essington? What if they did take Paris? What if they did take Constantinople? Because there was a point in 872 AD, I think, where the Vikings did nearly take Constantinople, or Miklagard as it was called. And so if you just tweak history a little bit, then the world could have been very different. The world could have just come to the point where, instead of being English or Anglish, the Angles being an almost Danish tribe anyway, what if they just kept their gods? They kept Odin around. They didn't bother assimilating the White Christ. And what would the world look like? It would have meant that when the English sailed over to Virginia, they would have done so under a Norse flag, under the Raven banner, and thus the words that we're speaking on this podcast wouldn't be Anglish; they would be Norse. There you go. So that's the train of thought I went on then.
Okay.
And often go on now as I now get into the RPG, and as I get into the new content that I'm creating. It's what would that world look like if it had the Norse Empire at the root of it all, at the foundation of it all, as opposed to the Roman Empire, which gives us our letters and gives us our laws and gives us our architecture. Right? Let's just change it around.
Interesting. So your premise is then, by Odin making him more predominant rather than falling, into the shadows with the expansion of Christianity, he pushes off the inevitable aspect of Ragnarok. Is that what he's trying to do?
Yes. I mean, that's the nub of it, but now I'm going to get into a little bit of temporal mechanics, if you wouldn't mind.
Okay.
The All-Father paradox. Are you familiar with the Grandfather paradox?
I am not. No. What? Oh, you mean in time travel?
In time travel. Exactly.
Yes. Sorry. Yes.
So, for clarity for the listeners, you go back in time, you kill your grandfather, therefore you can't be born, so you can't go back in time and kill your grandfather, and a paradox results, right? This ever-looping scenario. Now, there's lots of different ways to explain that paradox, were time travel ever to be possible, including the multiverse, in which all of these various different instances pop up a little bit like a Marvel movie series. But one of the ways in which it can be best explained is just by this looping, interlocked time. And so time forms this loop, a bit like a DNA helix. And what you've got is two interconnected, superposited states. You might have heard of Einstein and his spooky action at a distance and all of this kind of Schrodinger's cat style stuff. And I don't want to bore everyone with the quantum physics of it. But to all intents and purposes, if you've got two interlocked states, when one is positive, one is minus, one is negative, and they should, when you switch one back, the other one interacts with it. And so if you create these interacted, linked superposition of timelines, then that's what you've got in the Viking Verse. So you continue to have the Christian timeline that we all inhabit, but then you also have this interlocked All-Father paradox as opposed to the Grandfather paradox, because Odin has created it. Odin accelerates the technological focus of the Norsemen, and so he gives them gunpowder a little bit ahead of time. And I'll give you an example of what that means. So in the second book, Loki's Wager, in our history, there is this. Everyone's heard about Genghis Khan and the Mongol horde. They sweep out of Asia. They get all the way to the gates of Vienna, and they put all of what we now know as Russia under the Tatar yoke, right? And there's this it's just this epoch-defining period of history. Now, what people might not know is that the Kievan Rus and the Kiev that is under threat right now from the Russian war, that was all. It was called the Kievan Rus because it was part of the extended Norse orbit. Kings like Vladimir Vladimir is actually originally a Norse name, Valdemar, same as Voldemort. Voldemort from Harry Potter, right? They're all very much linked. They're just versions of the same. Same as Ian is Scottish for John, and Irish is Sean for John, and so all of these names are linked. My point with this is that if you took that to its logical conclusion, instead of the Kievan Rus being a dysfunctional satellite state that was Slavicized, being overrun by the Mongol horde, if it were part of a fledgling Norse empire, then suddenly there was more of a super state, then suddenly you've got this great clash of shield wall of the Norse versus horse archer. And, so I play around with that. I tell that story about how the Norse defend and win the siege of Kiev back in 1281, I want to say, as opposed to succumb. And so the Mongol Empire is stillborn. The Norse arise from the Middle Ages as the equivalent of the Holy Roman Empire, the dominant force in European politics. To link it back into Warhammer, they're the equivalent of the empire there, but it's all much more Norse. They're not the Kislevs of that setting. It's this northern pagan tradition, and I think when you can take moments of history like that and tweak them and see the ramifications, I think that's fascinating. Might just be me, but I've made it.
I'm utterly intrigued because listeners will know that I'm a history geek, so I'm utterly intrigued. So
yeah, we've done 2 episodes on alternative history, one with Jason Sheets and the other one with Ken Hite. So it is definitely a subject that both Keith and I enjoy. Keith is he enjoys a lot of the more traditional history. I enjoy more of the fantastical alternative history, but in the same sense, we're big fans of that. And that right there is absolutely fascinating because it's not just, hey, we just changed something. It's well thought out. It's the ramifications and the possibilities seem like that they've gone through the wash a little bit to be presented as clearly as possible that, if this actually progressed like this, it's a good possibility something like this could have happened, however fantastical it might be.
Yeah. And I'll give you 2 more riffs, if I may, off that then. So the first is, take Leif Erikson, right? Leif Erikson turns up on the shores of North America, Vinland, as he calls it. And he has a battle with the indigenous people, which he called the Skraeling. And this is all about 1000 AD, 500 years before Columbus. Now, he gave it up and his successors retreated. But that's because he was a dude from Iceland. And Iceland was a bunch of exiled colonists from Norway, which was itself being assimilated into, there was a change, and Christianity was happening. And Leif Erikson himself was seeing all of this change. Iceland hadn't become fully Christian, but it was about to. So the point is, you got this guy who's an explorer from an offshoot colony of a bunch of exiles from a backwater Northland kingdom. Now switch that around and say that Charlemagne's empire never came to pass. And collapsed, and the Danelaw continued to exist. So England was the fringe of empire. Then you can see that Leif Erikson, or the version of him in the Viking Verse, would be someone who was properly empowered in the same way as that Walter Raleigh or Christopher Columbus was 500 years later. And you can see that Vinland would have been properly colonized a lot earlier. So yes, to your point, I have tried to get the history right. There's a famous historian called Arnold Toynbee who wrote the study of history, this massive 13-volume text. And one of the things that he puts in one of his appendixes is he does this first piece of counterfactual history, which is the abortive birthright, or the forfeited birthright of the abortive Scandinavian civilization. And it's a few pages long, but that was really one thing that triggered with me as well. That this great historian had thought about, well, they were so close to doing all these things and then just didn't. But I'll give you, because I know that you're a bit more fantastical, I don't want people to think that I've just weighed this down in the deepest, darkest history. There are fantastical elements, because any good RPG has to have a magic system, for example.
Right.
And there has to be some kind of fantastical about this universe. So when you get into the Jotun War is a retreading of Vietnam and World War II and all of the seismic battles of the last century, but it's told through the Norse lens looking at these Norse nightmares, the Jotnar, who were the giants of Norse myth. Giants being a French word, and we'll get onto elves and dwarves in a minute. But the Jotnar are recast as kind of Christian avenging angels, and they use the DNA to create these creatures genetically, and it enters this world-spanning war. So it's not World War II; it's the world-spanning war, the Newer Heimar, the 9 homeworlds of Norse mythology, and so it does take on this titanic world-spanning fight, and that's where you start to bring in the fantastical elements. That's where you start to bring in my equivalent of hyperdrive, which is memory drive based upon Hugin and Mugen, Odin's ravens. So you take all of this mythology, and it just becomes the new lens, the new blueprint for how you lay out the pagan present, because Norsemen wouldn't think about souls. They wouldn't think about angels and demons. Sorry, Rob Schwab, demons are chucked out now, because you think in terms of Jotnar. You think in terms of the Huga and the Hammer and these Norse traditions for what the multi-part self is. You don't think in terms of fireballs and Vantsian magic. You think in terms of Seither and Gand and Galda. And but the point is that all of these things were the root of D&D. They were the root of Warhammer. All of this northern magic was what inspired Tolkien, and Tolkien turned it into pointy-eared elves and grumpy dwarves, and he did a masterful job. Don't get me wrong.
Right.
I'm not saying he laid the foundation for everything we know and love, but he also subverted it. He also changed it into creating his epic from those old ancient northern tales and traditions. So what I've tried to do is bring those traditions back to the fore, and then kind of reinterpret the whole fantasy framework through as authentic a Norse lens as I can, given that I'm making it all up.
Right. So the RPG itself, the kind of, we'll move in and out, of course, so we don't really have, a set structure with this, but in regards to the RPG, what timeline then within the Viking verse does it essentially take place? Because looking at some of the imagery, it looks futuristic, like it takes place someplace farther in the future. At least that's a lot of the look that we from the pictures that we've looked at.
Yeah, understandably. And so again, technically it's a pagan present. Technically it takes place in the equivalent of the now. Okay. But it's a very changed now just because Odin has accelerated the timeline.
Exactly.
Right?
Okay.
Because he's given we shouldn't lose sight of the fact that the Norse were actually not just bloodthirsty Vikings who went on raids. They were a very cultured, technologically advanced people. They sailed the world. They had excellent navigational skills and technology. And if you add to that the compass, in addition to just the kind of lodestones that they had, if you add to that the the gunpowder, if you add the stirrup, if you start throwing these things in a little bit earlier, there's no reason why a very savvy, industrious, and wily group of people couldn't, just embrace these things quicker. And
Right.
war being the mother of all invention, give a Norseman gunpowder, and he'll do what the British did, rape and pillage the world several centuries earlier.
Right.
So that's why it feels slightly more technological. But there was this, the Norse word for wizard is really, they use the first part of it is the wise. They always talk about the wise man, right? And wizard just is just like die hard, right? Die hard. Wizard is wise hard. It really is. That's the origin of it. In the same way as Richard is a name that means very wealthy, rich hard, and so all of these, again, you come back to this language that's at the heart of things. A wizard was the most wise man, and all wizardry is stuff that we didn't understand. And so you get Arnold's, Arthur C. Clarke's third law, about the fact that technology and magic aren't too far removed, and so I play with that as well. All of the magic in the world, the spellcraft, is really just some version of technology given its Norse coating.
Is it reasonable to assume then, with the accelerated timeline, right, that the Norse got the technological advances earlier than our timeline, our real timeline? So then technology advanced at an earlier rate or at a faster rate, so that the imagery that we're looking at, the guns that we see, or these navigational aids that look like computer screens, are things that we as modern day people may see 30 years down the road, 50 years, 100 years down the road. That is their equivalent of our modern day here and now, right?
I think that's fair.
Okay.
I'm going to throw another wrinkle in just to completely continue to complicate things, because here's the essence of Norseness, right? If they're not a God-fearing people. They are a people who believe that the gods are kind of there to be bothered. But they're not going to rely on them. They don't. Gods. What have the gods ever done for me? There's no real prayers. However, what they do have is a real depth of love for nature, and the reason why berserkers wear bear pelts, and the reason why the Ulfhednar were embraced the power and the speed of the wolf, is because these animals were very totemic. What we talk about in D&D with the druid and shape changing and spirit animals, all of that kind of stuff, it is all very Norse, that naturistic side of things. They would adorn themselves with animals because the eagle was powerful, the deer was fleet, all of these kind of things, right? So I play around with that a little bit, but the crucial thing is that they also felt that the world's tree, Yggdrasil, was the literal pillar of existence. It upheld the Nuaheima, the 9 homeworlds, the Alfheima, the Jotunheima, Midgard. You would have heard all of this in Norse mythology. Now, what I do, and this is where it gets most fantastical, is I make Yggdrasil literally real as an alien intelligence. So by that I mean, where does mankind come from? In the Christian myth, Adam and Eve. In the Norse myth, Aska and Embla. Aska and Embla are the equivalent. They are people born of the tree. Mankind was born literally from a tree. And so I took that myth and I recast it so that Yggdrasil is this alien intelligence, and it seeded the 9 homeworlds with its people, it's motile servants. Humanity is effectively just a means of the tree propagating itself and surviving. And when Ragnarok happens, one of the key events of Ragnarok is the tree is shaken to its roots. The tree is assaulted. The creatures like Nithhogg are devouring the roots, and so I play around with all of these things. And again, if you've grown up in any kind of vaguely Christian household, you know about Armageddon, you know about the devil and Satan arising. All of this exists in a Norse form, and Ragnarok can be recast in this way as well, where there is an assault on this great alien intelligence, which is the tree Yggdrasil, and its servants, which is mankind. Now, if you realize, as a human being, that hang on, there is an alien intelligence, and it was it literally created me. That changes your world view and your outlook and your religion. Yeah. And so, yes, I've banged on a lot about that, so I'll shut up for a second. But it's a crucial part of it. I didn't want to just have people worshipping Thor and Odin, because that's not real. They never did. And especially if you find out that you are created by a tree, well, you're going to start really worshipping the tree, not just patting it, in the forest every time you go past.
I'm further intrigued. I honestly am. The idea that the timeline was developed earlier, like things in our real timeline are introduced earlier and then accelerated, so it creates this alternative timeline. I'm really kind of intrigued.
Yeah.
Good. Well, that's the point. And then you can play around with that kind of link between the two timelines. And going back to the All-Father paradox. The All-Father paradox starts with a church warden in the north of England, and he's standing by something called the Gosforth Cross, and it exists. It's in Cumbria, in the Lake District. This 1,000-year-old cross, and if you and your listeners look it up, you'll see that it's carved with all of these stories of Ragnarok. It has the Fenrir wolf. It has the sun wheel at the top that's about to be swallowed, and it was Norse tradition being carved in stone, because that's how they told their stories. But it was also at the era where Christianity was changing and taking over things, and the old beliefs were fading away. So I went to this cross, and that was really the inspiration for that part of the story, because I have this church warden. It's in the grounds of a church, a kind of 1,000-year-old church. They've got these hogback tombs, these amazing ancient tombs that would have buried old Viking chieftains, and they've kind of they're in the church. They're in this musty, smelly, ancient church, and you can touch them, and it all feels real. And so I cast this setting as the old church warden. He's the custodian. He looks after this. He has all kinds of visitors, who visit the north of England. They visit Beatrice Potter's house. They're on the tour of the Lake Districts, and occasionally they see this cross. He's the custodian of this cross. And then Odin comes in. Odin is an old man, and we always know that Odin's always in disguise. He's always, appearing in some form or other and testing people. And he turns up, and he's there, and he says, "Well, you've got it all wrong, church warden. This cross that tells this story, where I'm from, things went a different way." And so it's like that old poem, right? How the path less traveled,
right?
And that's where I go, because you need someone in the present day with the present understanding to act as that viewpoint on the Viking verse, to say, well, hang on, Bottle for the Black, that's not a real Viking. I know about Ragnvald, I know about Thorstein, but I don't, Bottle for, who's this guy? And Odin tells him then the story. And as he's telling him the story, the Christian universe starts to vanish. And that might sound a bit hackneyed, but the church vanishes, and the church warden finds himself becoming more and more enmeshed in the alternate reality, to the point where that then becomes his mission, to try and restore the balance, so to speak. So that was the original story, and it's just sprung into this RPG where you can now just inhabit the Viking verse and unleash your inner Viking as if you're a modern day hero.
Could you? I know Scott's got a question, but
no, go ahead.
Could you play the role playing game as not as the church warden, but as the church warden's transitioning into this kind of juxtaposition between the two timelines, but play out those stories as the players in the story of the church warden and the things that the church wardens would have been experiencing in the original stories?
Yeah. So I'll give you a couple of examples of that. So your great minds think alike. So in the role-playing system, one of the things I added into Rob's Shadow of the Demon Lord rules was this notion of threads of fate, which are in Old Norse, Orlog Statir, right? Threads of fate. Orlog is, or Orlor, is the kind of destiny of man, the inescapable destiny. So the Norse believed that you were just born with inescapable destiny. It was all mapped out for you. You can't fight against your fate, right? So the notion there is that I give you, as games master, when you set up a character, I give you this thread of fate. And it could be that, something from Norse legend, like you ate the heart of a polar bear. It could be that you just like Thor was thrice cursed by a Norn, right? Or in the case that, I draw from my own books, and it could be that, you were, you're in the wrong universe. You're segueing between the two, and you don't understand why all of these pagans are suddenly in charge. So you can, as a GM, you can exactly create that story. You can have, people wandering around, exploring it as interlopers, as aliens, or some of the characters can be that, right? They can be, lost across dimensions. One of my favorite reviews for the whole series was that it's American Gods meets Doctor Who, and I'm a big Whovian, big Doctor Who fan, and I love the time travel. I love the TARDIS, and going back to one of the original series, The Meddling Monk, right? That was a big inspiration as well.
Yeah, I'm a giant fan of the American God books and a couple of the follow-ups to it. And this series, when it lasted and whatnot, it did a good job. But it was, for me, my introduction to a lot of some of the lore and mythology involved, because the central character, it's not a spoiler, it's Wotan, it's Odin. Yeah. And it led me to other things and become interested in immerse myself in a lot of these things, and it led to other religions because it deals with other aspects and whatnot. But that's fascinating, because I've said for years I would love to have a game made not unlike something that existed within the American Gods type universe. So that's fantastic. Whoever wrote that review is sounds like he's spot on. So that's great. The game itself is built upon the Shadow of the Demon Lord engine. I don't know if that's the official name for it. Was that the original concept when you started playing with this idea? Because when you created this, was there the intent to make a role-playing game, or was it, I'm just going to go ahead and make these novels and then the graphic novel, and then it just kind of naturally progressed into that?
Yeah, that's a good question, because I started writing books, right? So writing books and comics. And then shortly before the pandemic, I was in Seattle with some buddies over at Wizards of the Coast, old EA chums who had settled there. Right. And I live in Victoria, BC, so it was a ferry ride. And we popped in with the kids, and the kids were a bit younger. And I got given the Essentials kit, that box starter pack. And the kids on the ferry back just didn't stop reading it. So, and that's the thing, right? Yeah. D&D RPGs, it is lightning in a bottle. It's just an imagination factory. And so there and then, and the kids were 10 and 13 at the time, and I hadn't role played for a while. I played, through college, and then, was making a living, doing the dishes, all of the other things that just get in the way. But on that ferry ride home, I said, okay, well, we need to start playing D&D. So we assembled bunches of the kids' friends and started playing, and those groups are still ongoing. And through the pandemic, it was a lifeline for all of those kids and all of the people who came to the table. And so we played some multi-generational games as well. And so that really was the eye-opener for me, and that was why I decided to then write the RPG. And I started working with a guy called Darren Pierce, who was introduced by my publisher. He worked a lot with Rob. We determined that Shadow of the Demon Lord was the spiritual successor to Warhammer, and and all of the things that were in my DNA. And love D&D as I do, it isn't the most elegant system, and it does start to become hackneyed, and I can't abide pointy-eared elves and short dwarves because they're not mythologically accurate.
Right.
And so, it was put in touch with Rob, and then started to work out how to apply that vision I had of the Viking Verse to his rule set. And that was it was a great system, but making an RPG, holy moly! I thought that writing a novel was a marathon. This is like an Iron Man challenge where you're doing 17 marathons back to back, because it took a long time. It's taken 2 years, and we kickstarted it last summer, summer of 22, and it took a further year to get polished and out. And it's just one of those things where you think you see the light at the end of the tunnel, and then you realize that, well, that was just the beginning of the tunnel. There's so much to do, so much to get right, and oh yes, I won't bore everyone with that. But it's a challenge. Writing an RPG is not for the faint-hearted.
If anyone wants an interesting insight to what it is like to helm, the creation and the continuing support of an RPG, just pop on Rob's Facebook, and you can see every other day a wonderful look into the aspects, the jubilation, and also things that cause your hair to fall out at an early age, because he definitely rides the roller coaster of that. And he kind of,
yes, he does.
He removes the veil. It's not just, we have an idea and I'm going to get together with friends. We're going to roll dice. It's going to be perfect. And it'll be up on Kickstarter and everyone will be happy and there'll be no complaints and it'll be published on time and yay. So
I think it's actually his birthday. This day that we're recording, I think it's his birthday. So happy birthday, Rob! If you're listening to this, if you lift your head up from the demons and the Weird Wizard, because he's got Weird Wizard being kickstarted next week. If you hear this, then happy birthday, Rob!
Happy
May
birthday!
Demons sing you to your wherever you're off to.
Right. Happy birthday, Rob. And no matter what Bud says, 1,000 Thrones is not the worst thing to come from Warhammer. That's an inside joke, but
yes, it is. Oh God, is it an inside joke?
I
do want to touch briefly on not mechanics, not setting, but I do want to talk about the art. I do want to give a shout out to your artists. I believe you have 2, maybe 3 artists that were involved in the role playing game.
There's a guy called Gare Curti. He did the majority of the stuff for the RPG, and he did issue 4 of the Jotun War. And prior to that, it was Dev Pravmalak, and Dev did issues 1 to 3. And then my former publisher did a lot of the cover artwork. And so, there's a guy called Jeremy Moeller, and he helped bring the series to life. So kudos to all of those guys. It's interesting because you made the assumption yourself. They do kind of all feel like graphic novels. They all do feel, I don't know, just like they're not just words, they're all of this imagery as well. So I mean that's good, and I think it's a different and unique look and feel to many of the RPGs out there. A lot of people have said it feels a bit Jack Kirby, and so it's a good thing. But for me also, that I sometimes wrestle with that gritty reality of a lot of the Viking art that you see, and then this more cartoony style. So it's always gratifying to hear that people like it and it resonates, because sometimes just for me, it doesn't quite resonate.
I mean, I like it. What I see on the just scrolling through the Kickstarter page alone, I find those art samples fantastic. They really pop. They stand out. I get a sense of this alternate timeline that you talked about, where things were started earlier and then progressed at an accelerated rate, even though it's still the 2020s or the 2020 nows or whatever, however you're calling it in the Viking Verse, and then pulling up the comic and looking at the art there, and just the sample file at Drive Through Comics. I mean, looking at it just screams to me the setting. I'm digging it.
Yeah, it's a different art style than Shadow of the Demon Lord. It's also a different art style than Rob's other punk apocalyptic. Right. It's its own thing. So it's not like what tends to occur with some other systems. It's essentially, here's a car wrap. It's pretty much exactly the same, except it just looks different. But this seems to stand alone. It's Shadow of the Demon Lord by Engine, but the artwork, the layout is its own thing. And with that, I'm curious, just to kind of maybe wet the whistle of some of the listeners, it being Shadow of the Demon Lord, so if I'm making a character, what would be some examples of maybe some origins and the paths that are going to be presented within the game for the players to choose from? Because I have a feeling this is definitely going to be different than what they might be used to in Shadow of the Demon Lord and Punk Apocalyptic.
Well, just going to come straight onto that, but you should go have a look at vikingverse.com.
Okay.
Because on vikingverse.com, you can download the whole issue 1 for free. And you can also listen to a whole bunch of Old Norse on SoundCloud, all for free. We released a book called Old Norse for Modern Times, and it has phrases, if you want to say, roll for initiative in Old Norse, then it's there. If you want to say, behold my power as Dungeon Master, all there in Old Norse. So go to vikingverse.com and practice your Old Norse. I love it. And that was a Kickstarter as well. But the whole point was, if have you ever wanted to wield the silver tongue of Loki? The joke on that book was, never be lost for words again with this book of lost words. Anyway, I digress. It's all there for free, because I want people to say things like, nice tattoo in Old Norse. Mm-hmm. Now, origins. Yeah. Origins in a Norse-based RPG, they need to come from mythology. And so I have Alpha, I have Dverga. Alpha are elves, the original, the inception of elves. Dverga were born from the bones of Earth, the soil of Earth, the original Titan, the original Jotnar, who was called Ymir. And some mythologies talk about them being, the equivalent of maggots. I have recast them as kind of robots. They're born from soil and oil and the rocks, and so they're not purely the kind of mechanical robots that you would see in our existence, but they're broadly similar. And I didn't want them to be short, because nowhere in Norse mythology are they short. Just nowhere. It just is. So I recast them as these beings of the earth. And there's definite elements. If anyone is a Douglas Adams fan, there's a definite, Marvin the paranoid android feel to some of. If you're, they're made with truncated lifespans. That's the only thing that's short about them, and so there's some kind of gaggery inherent in there. And if you're born with that kind of Blade Runner-esque 5-year lifespan, then you'll probably be a bit pissed off as well. So those, dwarves are bad-tempered. Right. They're just not short. And one of the things, just to talk about that progression then through the parts. So you start off, if you chose Dvergar as your origin, you might start off on a lowly beginner path, but as you build your character, and instead of master paths, I have mythic paths. By the time you get to be, the kind of warden class or the warrior class, the Drekker, then you're just bigger, more augmented, more just immense. You become mythic in yourself. So you're not just a journey from a journeyman mage to a master magician. You literally grow into the role, because a lot of these Norse characters were larger than life, and they did embrace kind of mysticism or different aspects of their inner self. And so, again, with the Jotnar is another origin based upon that kind of genetically engineered giant bred for war, augmented with animal parts and animal, DNA. And, why by the time you get to the mythic path there, that's where you can become a real troll. Now, troll in the mythic sense was a magician. Wasn't the kind of strange, big-nosed, sharp-teethed, under the bridge dwelling entity that we know. It was to trolla was to enchant. And so again, we come back to language, right? Because a troll was, through Christianity, turned into this bridge-dwelling monstrosity. Originally, they were these kind of enchanting, sometimes evil, but not really. They're more just beings of nature. And so the Jotnar can become a literal troll. The Lotnar can become a literal lindworm. A Jotnar, easy for me to say after all of this time writing Norse books, can become a Thurs. And all of these words drawn from Norse mythology. So you start off humble, but you become these titanic beings. Alfar as well. Alfar, were really demons of the dead. And somewhere along, Christianity and then the Victorians putting fairies at the end of the garden, things shrunk. Things shrunk because Christians didn't want them to be anything apart from a marginalized figure. They Sunday school banished these things to the edge of the garden and to the remote bits of our fantastical mindset. But these were demons of the dead that haunted battlefields and took the warriors who were worthy into Valhalla. And so, my Alfar are similar. They are born of Yggdrasil. They are the avenging. They're kind of like the white blood cells of Yggdrasil, because real trees don't have white blood cells. They have to kind of cauterize their own wounds. My Alfar, during the great scream that happens during Ragnarok, are thrown out by Yggdrasil as it's equivalent of avenging angels. They are cold-hearted creatures. They might look a little bit like Treebeard. They might look a little bit like Ents, but they are ruthless scions of Yggdrasil. And that's much more akin to what they were back in the Dark Age myth before Christianity turned them into the Los Alfa and the Doc Alfa, and and before Snorri Sturluson, who was our only real source for a lot of Norse mythology, but it's contaminated by Christianity the whole time. So I've tried to strip it out, and nothing against Christians, nothing, I'm not trying to knock what people believe in. I'm just trying to say that in my universe that I've created, I've tried to exorcise that, and I've chosen that with purpose.
Keith and I know we're just like at your every word. We're just absolutely fascinated with all of this. Not what we were expecting, obviously. I mean, we did a little bit of look into it, but we wanted to hear, we wanted to get it from from the source.
I have to find my marketing person then if they're not doing a good job at conveying all of this.
No, you are.
I am my marketing person.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's absolutely fascinating. This I can assure you that whenever we conclude this, is going to be something that Keith and I are going to be looking into and recommend it also. But so we've got the player characters. We've got a couple examples of what they can choose from. I assume that it expands out from those few examples and similar and branch out. There's
10 origins, and then a whole bunch of paths, and the paths start off as the wise, the outlander, and they're archetypes, and they're very similar to what Rob has got in his original paths. I have a skald as opposed to a bard. And then it moves on through the expert classes, very similar to anyone who's played Shadow, but you just you have the Thread Rider, the Varangian, you have the Number Witch. I love that. Some of it is drawn from modern Icelandic and the portmanteaus that they create to describe modern words. And so again, these are things that you might recognize. The classes are echoes of Rob's, but what I've done is I've also made sure that if you do want to learn Old Norse, you have the Old Norse name for every spell, every monster, every class, so that you can tussle with that as you. It's like a language course and an RPG all rolled into one.
Nerdfest.
Do you have the Norse equivalent spell for Shadow of the Demon Lord's Hateful Defecation, or did you just not want to go with that?
How did I know you were going to ask that?
I do have.
You do.
No, not quite.
Not
quite. But I do have fart runes, which are fret runa, because again, what I've tried to do is come up with things from the sagas that I can substantiate. Right, so I know that the Old Norse magicians carved fret runa, fart runes, to make people, diverge their bowels. So it is, in a sense, hateful defecation.
That just makes my inner 7-year-old happy.
Oh God!
Rob actually, as he looked through in one of his first passes, checking things, he did actually put a note on that in the Dropbox and said, "Really, is this not a spell mistake?" No, it's actually fart runes. It's a level 0 spell But generally speaking, the traditions are all, like I said, they're drawn from the sagas, and so they are words that will be unfamiliar to people. But Galda is chanting spells, and the reason why we have enchantment is because we used to chant spells in the Norse tradition. They used to bang a drum, a bit like a band today, like Helruna. They'd bang their winnowing drum and they'd call out to the spirits. And that was the basis of magic. It wasn't this impermeable chaos that was around, or it wasn't the bright energy of Warhammer wizards. It was just the spirits. And the spirits were the people who died and were still around to help you out. And a lot of so there's not necromancy, but there are necropants. And if you haven't come across you're looking perplexed. Necropants there's a museum in Iceland.
I'm familiar with the necropants at the museum. I've seen the articles.
You see, so necropants are literally the flayed skin of a friend who, after they were dead, you were allowed to get their flayed skin. You wore these necropants I call them corpse breeches as the artifact in the game. And as long as you put a gold coin in the scrotum of your dead friend's skin that you were wearing as pants, then you would duplicate that and be eternally wealthy. So necro pants are this summer's fashion, and I urge
in the Viking Verse,
everybody
they are the fashion of the season. So on the character creation and stuff like that, is there any interchangeability or interoperability with the original game as far as like paths and the archetypes between Rob's original game and yours? I know obviously they're named differently, but could a player of the original game, kind of take something from that and bolt it into the Viking Verse, or is it meant to be?
I think pretty much. I do have there's a couple of things where I reference that. There's I talk about if you really want to play a goblin artificer, then on Earth, then you can transport him to Midgard and vice versa, right? So you can do that. If you want to play Viking Age games that are more traditional sword and sorcery, then of course you can. I mean, you just strip out the guns, and you strip out the spaceship stuff, and you just make it running around, fighting giants as opposed to fighting Jotnar, right? So you can strip it all away, and I know for some people, they prefer that fantasy setting, and they do want to just be plain old Vikings as opposed to space Vikings in inverted commas.
Yeah. Game masters and players, being just that, game masters and players, have their preferences, and if something's already 80 or 90% of the way to that preference, and it's just a matter of taking this from over here and bolting it in and doing a little whoopsie daisy changeroo, and they have what they want now at 100%, then they're more apt to do that. So
I think it's very easy to do. I mean, the key changes of things like, instead of corruption, I have honor and shame, because those are a key part of the Norse outlook. And if you're going to play a Norseman, then I'm not worried about being lawful good or lawful neutral or lawful, all of the various alignments. But honor is integral, because you have to behave in a certain way to benefit your community. Otherwise, you're cast out and you become a nithing, and are scorned and are basically able to be killed at will. So there's you can be shameful, you can be a nasty piece of work. Of course, play it how you like, but just understand that the rest of society won't like you very much, even for a setting in the middle of Ragnarok where everything is going to rack and ruin. So of course, I'm very aware that people want to play it their way, and you can just strip out the guns, just change the references to DNA and physics, and make it mystical again, right? Make it magical as opposed to scientific, and then you'll be absolutely fine. The point for me really was the authenticity and the setting, as you can tell, because I've described, the Mongols and the various other parts. I have laid out the entire timeline of this universe. So choose your point, choose your technology level for that point, and play it how you will. And in my futuristic version, the 9 homeworlds are reachable as exoplanets that you can reach through with thought and memory drive. If you want to go back to the kind of more mythological concertinaed version of them, where Jotunheim was just over the Elvir River and you could walk there through the icy waste with thought, that's absolutely fine. It's all of these things are just a matter of perspective anyway, right? Mm-hmm. That's what we're doing. Yggdrasil isn't in the old world an actual alien entity. It's just an important part of the world view. Mm-hmm. Is easy to strip it back and just run around. Just make sure your battle axes aren't double bladed, because oh my god, that's not a thing either.
Horned helmets? No, not.
Oh, don't start me on that. Wagner has a lot to answer for.
Oh, so before we wrap up here, I'd like to know. I know you were kind of in the the latter part of you're getting your fulfillments for the RPG out, and you're once that's all done, it's going to be coming to the general public. But is there anything coming from in addition to what you've just done for when the wolf comes? Is there a moment where there's going to be a large campaign that deals with Ragnarok?
Dun, dun, dun. So yes, what I've done thus far is 2 or 3 weeks ago, the early version went out to Kickstarter backers. It is all available on Drive-Thru RPG for everyone right now.
Yeah,
we got to copper level in the first few days, so that's something.
Nice.
It's my birthday on Monday, so if anyone can help me get to silver level by my birthday, then that would be super. 3 days to save the world. What there also is, though, released alongside that, if you go into the Schwalbe store, are the first 4 adventures.
Okay.
I call them sagas because rather than campaigns, for obvious reasons. And the first campaign, the first 4 sagas, which take you from novice through up to the cusp of expert, is the Thought and Memory saga. And the Thought and Memory saga is up there, 3 parts. The intro, which describes the whole setting, is available entirely for free. Technically, it's pay what you want, but go on to Drive-Thru, download that, and that explains all 11 chapters that are to come. The first adventure, which is called Nobody Dies in Hauptmakar, which is a misnomer because it can go horribly wrong and everyone can die in the first 5 minutes and there's be a very short campaign. But in theory, it's called Nobody Dies in Hauptmakar. That's included in the rulebook because I thought that was important to give people a taste of Holmgang and a taste of legal disputes, because that's very I know not many RPGs are full of legal disputes, but Norse stuff was. They were very legal people, and it also sets the scene. And and there's Isbjorn, which are polar bears. The whole setting is there, and Adventures 2, which is the Book of Daniel. Adventure 3, which is the Ghost Signal. Adventure 4, which is eluding me right now, but it's called Finnbogi's Wake, which is a terrible pun on Finnegan's Wake. but Finnbogi's Wake. And so those ones are all out there, and they tell the story of this interpolated universe. They tell you so you get some Christian echoes in there. I won't spoil it too much. You get a Draugr, the Norse equivalent of a kind of zombie vampire. There's some Jotnar in there. There's a good old fashioned retelling of of Thor's fishing expedition, and again using myth to kind of tell these stories for the players to take part in them in their own way. So and then the rest of the campaign is all written. It's all being laid out. I had a duty to get those first 4 to Kickstarter backers. We will bundle everything up. Right now, you can play them as a kind of sequenced individual sagas. We'll bundle them all up. All 11 will be there. It will come with eventually the full Space Vikings expansion pack, which introduces people to more ships and space battles, because that's important. The essence of being a Viking is getting on board a ship and going raiding. So I wanted to give that its futuristic bent. It's all written. It just needs to be laid out and released. And then, in an ideal world, I'll keep doing this. It's taken over from the novels and comics because it's genuinely more fun to play out these stories around the table than it is to write them in a novel that, some people read, but it's not like I'm on the Times or the New York Times, or as I like to joke, the Neva Jorvik Times list. I'm on that. I'm on the Neva Jorvik Times. But the novels were fun. I think I've just advanced it into this interactive storytelling that I find fascinating. And the novels and the comics were a great bedrock for all of this. If I can just carry on writing adventures, sagas and rules in my spare time whilst I do business things in the real world, that's great. It keeps me sane, keeps me happy, and keeps me speaking Old Norse and confusing the hell out of everybody.
Nice.
Well, hopefully it'll keep all the people that are discovering your game happy too, because it sounds like with the copper is just the beginning, and I definitely hope and wish the game much success, but it does seem that it's in good hands and it's going to progress as such. So, anything else, Ian, you would like to mention before we round up our episode today?
I don't know. I think that's all good. I would just say that anyone who does want to, I don't know, it's kind of to be a part of this. One of the things that I've done with the Kickstarter backers is I've drawn them into the game, right? Literally drawn. One of the things was, if you like the art style, you can be part of the saga. You can be one of the guys in the backdrop. You can be a part of the rule book. And so some people are. Similarly with the adventures, some people are part of it. But the fascinating thing with this as well is you can Norsify everybody. I'm not just talking about putting a beard and a helmet on them. I'm talking about making them a Norseman. So, Rob Schwalbe, for example, becomes Schrobata Schwalba. And that sounds like a mouthful, but that's what he would have been called back in the day. Robert is originally an Old Norse name, and Schwalbe means to come from a certain region of Germany, and that would be Schwaber. And so I just like the idea of, there's a way to take what we've got today, strip it back down to its core DNA, draw it into the game, Norsify it, and you don't have to speak Old Norse to play this game. Of course, that would be ludicrous because you'd end up spitting everyone, and that's where the phlegm comes in. Right? I was
just about to ask about the phlegm.
But you should be able to just get a sense of it through the language,
right?
And stripping yourself back to your Norse self. I mean, I worked out what mine was as well. It's something like Ian. So my pen name is Ian Stuart Sharpe, which would be Ian Stuart Sharpe. Right. So it's not too far. That's the point. It's always close. Charles Darwin, Carl Devan, Albert Einstein, Albrecht Einstein. So it just adds a little bit to it, as opposed to being called Aragorn Strider or Athos, the pointy-eared elf.
Well, the original names for Bilbo and Frodo were a bit different too, but they weren't really Norsified. They were more sex toys.
And on that bombshell,
or close to it. I mean, we've all read that. Come on, they were just notes, but we've all seen them. Yes. So, Ian, thank you so much for coming by. This has been absolutely wonderful and fascinating. I hope that you were, you feel like you were able to present the Viking Verse at its full. I guarantee you, people are going to listen to this episode and they were going to go check out the game. And it's something that, being a big fan of Robert Schwab, being a big fan of Shadow the Demon Lord, it definitely sounds like, two good things have come together here to present a great alternative to a game. And the fact that that you're handling, this Norse aspect, this Norse mythology with a lot of care and attention, makes it a lot more enticing than just, let's put our plastic cap with horns on, put on a fur vest, and grab our double-bladed axe, and go knock
and
over
go be Bobby the Barbarian.
Right, exactly. So, but no, again, thank you so much. This has been absolutely wonderful. Keith?
Yeah, thank you. I'm enlightened. I'm not a veteran Shadows of the Demon Lord player. However, I am a big history lover, history gamer. So this really, as I said earlier, this is something that's really intrigued me. So I'm going to go grab me a digital copy this evening and probably get lost in it over the weekend. And Fortunately for me, my wife's going to a bridal shower tomorrow, so I have plenty of time to get lost in it. So it works out for me.
Super. That's super.
But
Good stuff.
yes,
Well,
thanks for coming on the
guys.
show and enlightening both Scott and I and our listeners. Much appreciated. I hope and wish you the most success possible with this and the future series of sagas. I look forward to seeing those all bundled up and put together in a print version and made available as well. So
yeah, feel free to come back on anytime.
Absolutely.
Something comes up again. We'd love to have you back.
You just called me up, and as you can tell, I don't get to speak about Vikings and Norse because my wife doesn't really like it that much. So when I get invited onto something like this, I just go. Blah, 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 blah.
That's how we. That's why we did the podcast, Ian. Because our wives
don't want to talk
either.
about this stuff either.
No,
so
this is our platform to just blah blah blah. And there you go. You had asked earlier. What's the length of the podcast? The length of the podcast is as long as we feel like talking. So you turn us on and blah blah blah. So,
all right, that wraps up this interview with Ian.
I think it will.
Now a few words about our Patreon. Hey, Titterpigs fam, just a quick reminder, we do have our Patreon going on. It's patreon.com/Titterpigs. You can show your support there. We have 2 tiers for you, a $3 and a $6 tier, so show us some love and be part of our growing community.
And speaking of our growing community, I'd like to give a shout out to our current patrons. Thank you so much to Dr. Mitch, Jason Sheets, Bud's RPG Review, Dwayne Costa, William Payne, Lupus Malum, Salt Heart, and Patrick Mullen.